Amazing Journey of an Apache Girl. Discover how one unexpected offer changed everything forever. Anaya woke before the sun fully embraced the horizon, the familiar scent of coffee mingling with the earth's dust awakening her senses. In the small kitchen of her family home, her parents' faces reflected a life marked by struggle, yet they remained steadfast, wearing the values of hard work like armor. Each morning felt like an uphill battle, an echo of the tension that wrapped around her as tightly as the thin blanket on her bed. She stared at her environmental posters adorning the walls of her cramped room, reminders of dreams encumbered by a weighty reality. At school, Anaya assumed her role in the classroom with a curiosity that spiraled into brilliance, outshining her peers. Yet, wrapped in admiration was an undercurrent of envy, and with every successful presentation, the stares lingered longer, burdened by ingrained prejudices about her heritage. Internal conflict twisted her stomach in knots, an unease that whispered, "Will they ever see you for who you are? Will they ever value your worth?" Just as hope flickered in her heart, a surprise visit from a renowned professor changed everything. He saw her in a sea of faces and offered a full scholarship, a lifeline, a dream awakening from the shadows. Anaya felt an ember of determination rekindle, but with it, a wave of pressure crashed over her. At home, whispers of financial doom haunted the corners of their modest living space as her father faced layoffs at the plant. Instead of celebrating her newfound hope, he turned to her and murmured expectations about extra shifts at the diner. Her pulse quickened, the thrill of scholarship suffocated under the weight of familial duty. How could she chase her dreams while tending to their survival? Conflict bubbled within her until one evening the weight became unbearable. Steeling herself in the cramped kitchen, she confronted her father. "Dad, I don't want to throw away this opportunity. I need to provide not just for us but for my community." His darkened expression cast a shadow as he struggled to reconcile his hopes for her with his desperation. "You think only of your dreams, but we need you here." The air thickened with anguish. Her mother's silent tears etched into the moment. Days passed, and buried within her family history lay stories of ancestral environmental stewardship, the pulse of the land connecting her past and future. The revelation sparked a fierce sense of purpose within her. She wasn't merely pursuing education, but carrying forward a legacy. But each step forward felt chained with the harsh grip of societal expectations. Pressure coiled tighter around her ambitions as the competition loomed, the stakes dangerously high. Just when clarity began to shimmer, the doorbell disrupted her frantic thoughts. Anaya hesitated, dread creeping through her as she answered. It was the professor. His face, etched with concern, struck her with a chill. "There's something we need to talk about," he said, and her heart raced. What awaited her in this moment? A revelation, a threat, or a chance? Whichever it was, it mattered not just for her, but for the dignity of her family. The weight of the world hung unspoken in the air. Anaya stepped back from the door, heart pounding against her ribs like a caged bird desperate for freedom. The professor's gaze bore into her, full of unspoken truths and expectations. She gestured for him to enter, swallowing hard as the weight of her family's struggles compressed within her chest. He settled at the worn kitchen table, the dim light casting harsh shadows that danced with the tension in the room. "Anaya," he began, his voice steady yet laced with urgency. "Your scholarship is not just an opportunity, it's a responsibility. The board has some concerns about your commitment to the program given your family's circumstances. They want to know how you'll balance your life here with your studies." The suffocating pressure of his words spiraled into her mind, a cacophony of what-ifs. The scholarship felt like quicksand, simultaneously a dream and a trap. "I can't let them think I won't succeed," she thought, the internal conflict tearing at her resolve. "Tell them I will manage," she finally replied, forcing conviction into her voice. "School is my priority. I have to prove to them, and to myself, that I can do this." The professor nodded, but something in his expression suggested doubt. "You understand, Anaya, this won't be easy. There will be long nights and tough choices, and I can't promise that everyone will support you." Support. The word echoed against the walls of her mind. It had become a fragile thread woven through her life, a lifeline she couldn't always count on. She thought of her father's weary face, the stress etched into the lines of his skin, each crease a reminder of the sacrifices he had made. What if I fall short? The thought struck like lightning, rendering her momentarily mute. The implications of failure dashed against her spirit like waves against jagged rocks. The uncertainty gnawed at her, but buried deep within was a stubborn spark of defiance. "You won't, if you believe in yourself," the professor urged, breaking into her reverie. "Embrace your heritage. It's not a burden but a strength. There are stories within you that have the power to inspire others." His words ignited something dormant in her consciousness, an ember of ancestral wisdom. Perhaps those environmental posters she had surrounded herself with didn't only reflect hope, they embodied the risk she now faced. She had a duty to herself and her lineage, carrying forward the legacy of resilience. But doubts roiled beneath the surface. What if facing the pressures of a failing family, academic expectations, and the weight of cultural prejudice is more than I can handle? She questioned, wrestling with the ghosts of her anxieties. An idea flashed through her mind, chaotic yet electric. What if she used her scholarship not just for her education, but to uplift her community? A chance appeared before her, not merely a personal escape from her circumstances, but a portal through which she could weave her struggles into the fabric of environmental advocacy. As clarity sharpened her vision, she spoke again, her voice steadier than before. "I won't just attend school. I want to bring my community with me. I can advocate for my people while learning. If I succeed, they will see our worth." The professor's demeanor shifted, impressed and intrigued. "That's incredibly ambitious, Anaya. We can work on initiatives that highlight indigenous voices in environmental contexts." Fire kindled within her, an unexpected alliance blossoming from their shared aspirations. The pathway ahead became a convergence of her dreams and community needs, a bridge connecting personal achievement to collective legacy. However, even as excitement surged through her, uncertainty lingered. What battles would she face in this dual pursuit? In that moment, Anaya felt a familiar twinge of fear, but also a burgeoning determination. The clash of pathways converged, and she could feel a storm brewing on the horizon. Just then, a shout echoed from outside. Her father, his voice thick with half-formed hopes and frustrations. Anaya tensioned, caught between the rising tide of ambition and the family she feared to disappoint. How would she navigate her newfound purpose against the backdrop of expectation? The reality of her choice hit hard, as heavy as the humid air around her. The next chapter of her life loomed ahead, fraught with potential and peril. The question lingered. Could she forge a new identity without sacrificing her roots? One thing was clear. The fight was just beginning, and the moment of truth was drawing near. The warmth of the morning sun streamed through the kitchen window, a gentle reminder of the possibilities ahead. Anaya leaned against the countertop, contemplating the day's tasks. The heaviness in her chest remained, but now it intertwined with a flicker of purpose. With every sip of her coffee, she felt the urgency of action sharpen her focus. She grabbed her notebook, pages filled with goals, thoughts, and dreams. The professor's encouragement lingered in her mind. Embrace your heritage. How could she weave her identity into her ambitions? Writing lists felt banal, yet each item reflected a piece of her struggle and determination. Her father's voice echoed from the living room, grumbling over the news. He had always been a pillar of strength, but today Anaya sensed a shadow of doubt in his words, a stark contrast to the optimism she sought to nurture. She pushed back against the urge to retreat into silence. It was time for clarity, not just for herself but for her family. "Dad," she called, her voice steady, "can we talk?" He turned, a hint of wariness in his eyes. "What's on your mind?" "I'm going to take my scholarship seriously, but I want to share this journey with you and the community." She saw the flicker of surprise cross his face. "I want to help others see the opportunities available. I need your support." He shifted in his chair, the lines on his forehead deepening. "Anaya, it's a tough world out there. People may not understand." "I know. I've felt that too. But what if I can change that perception?" The conviction in her voice surprised even herself. Every life experience had sculpted her into this moment, forging resilience and a desire to make a difference. Anaya observed her father's internal conflict. She could almost see the gears turning in his mind. You have ambitions, but what if others don't see your potential? The world can be cruel, and that's why I need to start this journey. I cannot let fear dictate my path. The quiet determination bubbled within her. It felt liberating to articulate her dreams aloud, transforming them from wisps of thought into tangible aspirations. Okay, I'll support you, but you have to promise to be careful. This won't be easy, he replied, his voice filled with protective love and lingering doubt. She etched a smile on her face, buoyed by his response. I promise. I'll balance my studies and the community work. My success has to reflect not just on me, but on everyone who believes in me. Their discussion lingered in the air poignantly, forming an unexpected alliance. She was glad to ground her ambition with the acknowledgement of family struggles. And yet, the weight of her own expectations tightened around her with every moment. Could she truly juggle the demands of academia whilst driving change at home? No time for self-doubt. Over the next few days, Anaya meticulously researched initiatives aimed at combining education and community outreach, scrolling through articles and connecting with other scholarship recipients. Each step felt heavy yet invigorating, a tightrope walk between aspiration and the reality awaiting her. As she shared her ideas with a few classmates, Anaya uncovered unexpected allies. Unearthed ideas flourished and began to sprout tentative plans. Yet, in her heart, the dual pressure continued to pulse. The expectations of her community, combined with academic rigor, loomed over her like an insatiable shadow. Then, at the week's end, she received an email requesting her attendance at a board meeting. Excitement and anxiety clashed within her as she questioned what they wanted from her. Had she crossed the fragile line of success? Or had she merely begun to scratch the surface of her potential? The boardroom awaited, thick with formalities, reputations, and decisions that could redefine not just her path, but her community's narrative. Anaya felt the stirrings of fear, but also an exhilarating sense of readiness. What would this moment demand from her? As she prepared to step into that meeting, the words of the professor reverberated in her mind, guiding her resolve. Her journey had begun, and each decision would test the limits of her strength. What awaited her in that boardroom would be pivotal, not only for herself but for the stories that remained untold. And as the door swung open before her, Anaya inhaled deeply, ready to confront whatever awaited her. What challenge would redefine her purpose and set the stage for her next fight? The moment of truth had indeed arrived. Anaya stepped into the boardroom, her heart thumping in her chest. The long oak table gleamed under the fluorescent lights, and the air was thick with anticipation. She scanned the faces around her. Some were familiar, while others were seasoned professionals with unyielding expressions. This room was a crucible, a place where potential was weighed against reality. Taking a deep breath, she set her notebook on the table. Before she could question the conviction that had propelled her here, a stern-looking woman at the head of the table gestured for silence. Thank you all for coming. We're here to discuss the new scholarship initiatives, and we want your insights, Anaya. The unexpected recognition left her momentarily speechless. Did they truly want her opinions? She had assumed her presence was merely to observe, yet here was an invitation to shape a future she had only begun to envision. Her voice wavered for a split second, but the professor's encouragement echoed. Embrace your heritage. Could she intertwine her identity with her purpose right now? Thank you for having me, she began, steadier than she felt. I believe scholarships must not only support individuals, but also reflect the community's diverse needs. Many students don't seek opportunities simply because they're unaware of them. Nods traveled around the room. Her confidence began to solidify. Anaya shared her research, speaking about her connections with underrepresented peers from her school. She felt the tension in the room gradually shift as she unraveled her vision. A project that would not only educate but empower others. Yet as her ideas took flight, doubt poked at the corners of her mind. What if they didn't take her seriously? What if this was another moment where ambition collided with the unyielding barriers of reality? She stole a glance at her father's reassuring smile that lingered in the back of her thoughts, grounding her against the tide of fear. "What do you propose we do differently, Anaya?" one of the board members pressed, sharpening the focus back on her. This wasn't merely a show. They were asking her to dive deeper. She hesitated, the weight of expectation palpable. In this moment, she faced a critical choice. Present an idea just to appease them, or unveil a concept that bore the imprint of her experience. The gut-wrenching challenge of vulnerability urged her to be authentic, to risk the path of untested ambition. What if we create workshops that illuminate the relevance of scholarships within our schools? Mentorship opportunities led by those who have succeeded against the odds could ignite inspiration, she proposed, her voice gathering strength. By sharing our stories, stories like mine, we inspire students to visualize their potential. A murmur swept through the boardroom, her words striking a chord. Yet, the tightening in her chest was not lost on her. Every presentation came with an implicit question. Did she have the prowess to back this up? The thrill of advocacy and the anxiety of obligation played an intricate dance within her. As the discussion deepened, Anaya remained laser-focused on proving her worth. As ideas exchanged and shifted in the room, the boards of her own doubt cracked just slightly, unveiling the simmering spirit of a young woman versed in the art of resilience. With the meeting closing, the board members expressed their agreement to further explore her ideas. "We'll keep you in the loop, Anaya," the stern woman said, her voice softer, more reflective of newfound respect. Relief washed over Anaya as she walked out, her feet lighter, yet fidelity to her vision had only just begun. The hum of possibility thrummed infectious energy through her. She knew there were obstacles ahead, but the triumph of articulating her dreams made the journey worthwhile. As she stepped outside, the sun was more brilliant than ever, nudging her towards the next step. The seed had been planted, yes, but now she needed to nurture not just her idea, but also her resolve. What challenges awaited when she confronted her community next, and how would she effectively transform her vision into a reality? The horizon was vast, but Anaya felt a rushing pulse. This was just the beginning. Anaya sat at her makeshift desk, which was really just an old dining table in her small apartment. Papers were strewn across it, research notes, sketches of potential workshop structures, lists of community contacts, all fluttering slightly in the breeze from the open window. The sunlight poured in, casting warm rays across her workspace, yet her mind felt a storm brewing. The boardroom meeting had ignited a flame within her, but now the reality of turning her vision into an actionable plan loomed over her. She picked up a pen and began sketching out her next steps, but the uncertainty loomed larger than the words on the page. Was she truly equipped to take on this project? Questions ricocheted in her mind like echoes in a cavern. Could she balance her academic responsibilities with this newfound ambition? Despite the warmth of the sun, Anaya shivered at the thought of insufficiency. She had come so far, but pushing boundaries often unfurled new fears. There it was again, the specter of self-doubt. This was the critical moment of her development. She needed to wrestle with the nagging question of whether she had the tenacity to follow through. What if she faced resistance, not just from the board, but also from her peers? Confronted with the stark realization of how fiercely her community had been held back, she felt a surge of determination. This wasn't just an opportunity to bring change, it was a call to arms for her own identity, her own purpose. Each workshop needed to resonate with authenticity, pulling from her own lived experience. Anaya flipped the page and jotted down a list of potential mentors, people from her community who had thrived against the odds. She envisioned inviting them to share their stories, but the thought of approaching them filled her with hesitation. What would they think? Her heart raced at the prospect of rejection. She paused to breathe, a technique she learned in her yoga class. Maybe she could start small, build connections gradually. Could she coordinate a listening session first? Perhaps a casual gathering where stories could flow organically? An idea began to take root in her mind. Metrics of success shouldn't just be about numbers. The qualitative impact of sparking a dialogue could be more powerful. But organizing a community gathering would present its own challenges. She envisioned the logistics, the venue, the invitations, the potential for backlash. Her pulse quickened and a deep-seated worry surfaced. Was she prepared to face the resistance that could arise from confronting the prevailing norms within her community? Anaya's thoughts turned to her father, and the stories he had shared about doing the hard work of change, about weathering storms and remaining steadfast in one's beliefs. That steadfastness fueled her resolve. She needed to find a balance between dreaming big and executing those dreams. With renewed purpose, she started drafting an email to potential local mentors, inviting them to a meeting to discuss the project. For every ounce of fear that coursed through her, she felt a counterbalance of excitement and commitment. But just as she pressed send, her phone buzzed, disrupting her concentration. It was a message from a board member asking her if she would be willing to present her proposal to a larger audience, a consortium of educators and community leaders. Anaya's breath hitched in her throat. This was an opportunity that could launch her vision into reality. Yet the stakes were undeniably higher, and so were her fears. Would she rise to the occasion or retreat into the familiar shadows of self-doubt? As the screen dimmed, Anaya felt the weight of the decision before her. The moment of truth had arrived. Would she accept the challenge, or would she let it glide past, another opportunity slipping away into the ether? The choice was hers to make, and in that choice, her next transformation awaited. Anaya stared at her phone, feeling the weight of anticipation heavy in her chest. The message from the board member resonated deeply, echoing her innermost fears and aspirations. To present her proposal to a broader audience would catapult her vision into uncharted territory, but it also meant facing the louder whispers of doubt. What if they questioned her capabilities? What if they dismissed her ideas as naive, a product of ambition without experience? She wrestled with her disbelief. No longer could she view herself as a student with only dreams. Tonight, she could be a catalyst for change. Determined to quell the surge of anxiety, Anaya decided to embrace the moment as a learning opportunity, a testament to her capacity for growth. The stakes felt different now. They were not merely about her own fears but resonated with the collective hope for something greater. Tension coiled within her as she considered the presentation. She envisioned the details meticulously, clearly defining her goals, emphasizing the community's needs, and integrating stories from those who inspired her. But would that be enough? Her mind flickered back to the images of numb and indifferent faces, the weight of their skepticism hanging in the air like a heavy fog. Compelled to combat her insecurities, she opened her laptop to revise her proposal. Each word felt like an act of defiance against the doubts pooling in her mind. Anaya typed quickly, her fingers flying over the keyboard as clarity and determination surged through her. She would not just present a proposal. She was sharing a vision deeply intertwined with her own journey. Halfway through, a thought crossed her mind that knocked the wind from her lungs. Were her motivations truly rooted in passion, or was there an element of fear that she needed validation to prove her worth? As she stared at the screen, the answer began to materialize. It wasn't about proving anyone wrong, it was about crafting a narrative that others could relate to, showcasing vulnerability alongside potential. Suddenly, she felt the urge to reach out to her potential mentors, to involve them in her process, to lend their voices to her ideas. This was not solely her project. It was a shared journey that she envisioned. Each interaction could be a step toward creating something powerful, rife with authentic narratives. Before she could second-guess herself, Anaya started composing messages, eager to include them in her pitch. She invited them to share their stories, to come alongside her in this endeavor, each contribution a thread weaving a more robust tapestry. With a deep breath, she paused, overwhelmed by the possibility of connection. Yet, that same tether of doubt yanked hard at her gut. What if they turned her down? What if no one believed in what she was trying to build? The specter loomed again, but she steadied herself. Resilience is born from discomfort, she told herself, echoing her father's wisdom. In that moment, she resolved to confront her fears head-on, to risk vulnerability for the sake of authenticity. As the evening crept in, shadows filled her apartment, but the light of her fervor began to flicker brighter. Anaya took one last glance at her proposal, and, the chill of self-doubt giving way to resolve, sent out the invitations. With her heart racing, she let the uncertainty wash over her. She wouldn't allow fear to dictate her narrative any longer. Just as she settled back in her chair, her phone went off again. Another message, but this time it was from a familiar name among her potential mentors. A reply, an acceptance. A mixture of excitement and anxiety bubbled up, threatening to overwhelm her. She had made her first connection, but would it be enough to seal her position within that consortium of educators and leaders? The path ahead loomed larger than imagined, and Anaya could feel the weight of expectation on her shoulders. As she gazed out the window into the dusky twilight, she wondered if she was truly ready for the coming challenges. With this chance at her fingertips, the real test was not far off. Would she step forward boldly, or would she let this opportunity slip back into the shadows of doubt? The answers awaited, just like her next leap into the unknown. Anaya's heart raced as she settled at her makeshift desk, which now felt more like a launch pad. Each acceptance from her mentors was a small victory, yet with every flicker of hope came a dangerous undercurrent of fear. Could she truly harness their knowledge and experience to elevate her vision? Or would her reliance on their contributions expose her inadequacies? The shadows of doubt whispered again, "What if they see you as a hollow vessel merely echoing their voices?" It was unsettling. She took a deep breath, reviewing the responses. Each message brimmed with enthusiasm, but behind their words was the weight of expectation, her own and theirs. Did their belief in her signify that she was worthy of the role she envisioned, or did it place her on a tightrope, balancing her ambition against the impending risk of failure? As she sat engulfed in thought, Anaya began to outline the key points of her presentation. She envisioned the space where she would stand, her words aimed at igniting inspiration, while her doubts threatened to extinguish the fire. Imagining her audience, she recalled how hard-earned trust had been shattered in the past by those who had seemed supportive but were ultimately indifferent. Memories of her past failures invaded her focus. An encounter with a dismissive professor echoed in her mind, a searing reminder of criticism that had stung longer than it should have. "Focus," she muttered under her breath, fighting against the urge to dive into despair. It was time to remind herself why she was doing this. She had a distinct voice, a perspective that stemmed from her own struggles and triumphs. These stories were hers to tell, not borrowed from others. Resistance to her insecurities ignited a flicker of clarity. The real challenge was not in overcoming the doubts from others, but peeling back her own misconceptions about her abilities. Recalling her father's lessons about authenticity, she sat straight in her chair. She needed to frame her narrative, her journey, and showcase how it intertwines with the insights of seasoned mentors. Anaya spent hours pouring her thoughts onto the screen, projecting her evolving understanding of collaboration into her slides. Every section told a part of her identity, illustrating the tapestry of trials that shaped her vision. Yet, just as she began to feel a sense of accomplishment, insecurity crept in again. What if they questioned her credibility? What if the seasoned practitioners dismissed her youthful ambition as mere folly? A nagging voice insisted that she was activating ghosts of unworthiness. Just as she considered revising her pitch for reassurance, Anaya's phone chimed, a notification from one of her mentors, an invitation to meet. The moment sent a jolt through her, a mixture of excitement, apprehension, and anticipation. Should she dive into a personal meeting or maintain the safety of distance? Each option seemed laden with implications. She envisioned the discussion, voicing thoughts, absorbing insights from someone she revered, while simultaneously confronting the specter of inadequacy. Meeting her mentor might expose frailties she had kept veiled beneath layers of bravado. Could she capture a shared vision while being bare and authentic? Getting caught in this cycle felt paralyzing. Anaya stood, moving away from her desk, feeling the need to ground herself. She paced the length of her apartment, her mind racing. What awaited in that meeting? A meltdown into self-doubt or the unearthing of a collaborative spirit? This was more than a presentation. It was a defining moment nudging her closer to self-discovery. As she returned to her desk, resolute, she noticed the outline of her presentation looming on the screen. It was no longer merely a proposal. It was an invitation into a journey, a tapestry that strung together visions, hopes, and the promise of genuine dialogue. With renewed courage, Anaya set a reminder for the meeting, but a subtle tension remained. A question hung just beyond her grasp. Would embracing this opportunity allow her to confront the persistent self-doubt, or would it cast her deeper into the shadows she feared? The hour drew near, and she found herself glancing at the clock, teetering on the verge of a monumental shift in her journey. The reality of the meeting loomed, but unknown possibilities lay just beyond her reach. Would this connection propel her forward into growth, or unravel her carefully woven narrative? The next moment beckoned, a countdown to a pivotal decision. Anaya's pulse quickened as she prepared for the meeting. The air in her apartment felt charged with a potential that both excited and terrified her. This was the moment she had been teetering on the edge of, yet as she sat and waited for the video call to connect, the familiar weight of uncertainty settled on her shoulders like an unwelcome cloak. When the screen finally brightened, her mentor, Dr. Carson, appeared, his warm smile instantly disarming. He welcomed her with an infectious enthusiasm that almost made her forget her anxieties. Yet, as he began to speak, Anaya felt the creeping tendrils of self-doubt tighten around her throat. "I'm eager to hear your thoughts, Anaya. What's been inspiring you?" He leaned forward, genuinely interested. Just a moment, she thought, momentarily caught off guard. The question was meant to open the floor, but as she prepared to articulate her vision, her mind swirled with what she perceived as a lack of substance. Her heart raced as the silence stretched, and suddenly all she could think about was the risk of exposing her vulnerabilities. What if I falter? The question hung ominously in the air. In an impulsive decision, she released a breath she didn't know she was holding. "Actually, I've been rethinking my approach based on the feedback I've received and my own reflections," she finally said, her voice steadied by a hint of resolve. Could it truly be possible for her to share the parts of herself that felt most frail? Dr. Carson nodded encouragingly. "It's crucial to embrace your own voice, Anaya. It's your experiences that will resonate the most. You need to own that." His words echoed her father's teachings, and for a moment, the shadows of doubt momentarily receded. As Anaya discussed her ideas, she began weaving her experiences into the tapestry that formed her narrative. She spoke of failures that felt like weighty stones anchored in her past, yet now emerged as stepping stones in her journey, bigger and brighter than she had ever believed possible. The burden of her insecurities felt lighter, and in their place, a newfound clarity began to crystallize. But just as she felt a flicker of confidence surge through her, another thought intruded. What if this wasn't enough? What if vulnerability was just an invitation for judgment? Faced with that inner turmoil, she paused, venting her frustrations aloud for the first time. "But I worry that my lack of experience will overshadow what I have to say. I feel like a child trying to play with giants." A silence followed, heavy with significance. Dr. Carson looked contemplative, then spoke with a measured tone. "Anaya, your journey is unique. Your struggles are not shortcomings. They are raw materials for transformation. Every giant was once a novice, and it's through the fire of doubt that we are forged into our best selves." His words hung in the air, igniting embers of something deep within. Determination twisted with fear in a complicated dance as she attempted to reconcile this insight with her lingering doubts. Could her authenticity truly be her greatest asset rather than a liability? It was a powerful revelation, and she felt it reverberate within her. As they continued their discussion, Anaya caught glimpses of her potential shining through the cracks of doubt. Here was the authentic connection she craved, one that encouraged her to embrace both her vulnerabilities and her strengths. However, just out of reach loomed an unsettling question. Would this embrace of authenticity be enough to propel her beyond the confines of her self-imposed limitations? When the meeting came to a close, she felt the aftershock of her conversation coursing through her, invigorating yet unsettled. Was this the moment she truly began to understand the power of her own narrative? As the call ended, she stared at the screen with a newfound intensity, the shadows of inadequacy still flickering at the corners of her confidence. With each passing second, she sensed the shift within herself, the growing realization that moving forward would require confronting not just the doubts that surfaced in conversations, but the deeper fears that had held her hostage for so long. The time had come to face not only her mentor's expectations, but her own definitions of success, and to redefine what that success might look like. And now, as Anaya sat in the quiet aftermath, she understood that this journey was far from over. What lay ahead would either solidify her newly discovered strengths or demand a reckoning she could hardly bear to consider. The call for her next step beckoned. A pivotal choice awaited. Would she step into her narrative or retreat into the shadows? The morning light streamed through her apartment window, a gentle reminder that a new day had arrived. Anaya emerged from an uneasy sleep, grappling with the threads of the previous day still clinging to her thoughts. The video call had ignited a flicker of hope, but also a gnawing sense of urgency, a nagging belief that something had to change. She sat at her small kitchen table, cradling a cup of tea as warmth seeped into her palms, yet cold doubt nestled in the back of her mind. What had changed? Had she truly begun forging a path forward, or was it merely an illusion dancing on the precipice of ambition? Those questions ignited a fire within her. Today was not just another day, it was a chance to put her thoughts into motion. With resolve, she grabbed a notebook and prepared to analyze her situation. "What do I want to achieve?" she wrote, her pen moving with a newfound urgency. Yet with each answer, self-doubt whispered in her ear. What if you can't? The unexpected offer from Dr. Carson still lingered in her mind. He had invited her to present her ideas at a regional conference where emerging voices could filter through the noise of experienced professionals. It was an opportunity laced with risk, and she could practically hear her heart pounding at the thought of standing in front of a crowd. But fear, as she recalled with clarity, had often left her paralyzed. This time, something inside her defied the familiar trepidation. Anaya turned the page in her notebook. What if I reframe this fear? What if it becomes fuel instead of a barrier? The dawn of a revelation collided with her reality. Presenting her ideas was not a performance to be critiqued, but an expression of her journey, one that could resonate with many. Each word she spoke would cast aside the shadows that had long dictated her silence. As hours slipped by, determination replaced uncertainty, and she began crafting her presentation. With every idea she articulated, she felt her voice emboldening itself. Images of her past melded with her present ambitions, creating a mosaic that slowly transformed into a compelling narrative. However, moments later, each vision was met with trepidation as the thought of judgment crouched at the edges of her mind. This is no safe space, she reminded herself, finding comfort in the struggle of vulnerability. But maybe it's a space of growth. Anaya inhaled sharply, suddenly aware of a critical moment approaching. She could either succumb to the fears that had long shackled her, or embrace the opportunity that held the promise of change. She opted for the latter, promising herself that she would take the leap into the unknown. Just then, her phone buzzed, a message from Dr. Carson. I believe in you, Anaya. Remember, you're not just learning, you're becoming. The resonance of his words drove a surge of exhilaration through her. Was she truly becoming? The sense of movement within her, both thrilling and intimidating, suggested that she might just be on the verge of transformation. With determination etched in her resolve, she made a decision. She would take the next few days to refine her presentation, integrating her experiences wholly. She would not shy from her past, but instead use it as a compass to guide her forward. As Anaya prepared to get to work, a new question started to pulse at the forefront of her mind. What did it mean to not just present, but to connect authentically with her audience? The answer felt both terrifying and exhilarating. Ultimately, her self-imposed limitations had begun to unravel, revealing the first embers of possibility. Yet, with the looming conference date drawing closer, the fractures of fear and excitement remained. Just as she felt the burgeoning strength of her resolve, a chilling thought flickered through her. Would her newly discovered confidence withstand the scrutiny of the very giants she feared? The horizon of her readiness lay ahead, but was she prepared for the confrontation that awaited her there? The day of the conference dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to the tumult within Anaya. She stood in front of the mirror, rehearsing her opening lines, her reflection bearing both apprehension and determination. Each word she practiced resonated like a heartbeat, amplifying her sense of purpose. This was her moment, a culmination of struggle, growth, and resilience that she had crafted over the months. As she arrived at the venue, the hustle and bustle of attendees filled the air, creating a symphony of chatter and purpose. Anaya's heart raced, caught in the current of nervous anticipation. Standing under the bright lights of the stage, she saw representatives from various sectors, all leaders in their fields. Their eyes surveyed the room, dismissing some presentations while honing in on others. The weight of that expectation pressed down heavily on her shoulders, but somewhere deep within, a steadfast flame flickered. This was not a performance, but a chance to tell a story. She maneuvered through the audience until she found her seat, a palpable buzz in the air. As the previous presenter concluded, Anaya felt a rush of courage igniting within her. She was no longer just a girl with a scholarship. She was a voice carrying the hopes of her community and her ancestors through the space of privilege. When her turn arrived, she stood at the podium, her heartbeat echoing in the silence of the room. "Good morning, everyone," she began, leaning into the strength of her voice. "My name is Anaya, and today I'm here to share a narrative that isn't just mine, but one of resilience, of roots, and of a community longing for recognition." The words poured forth, each syllable echoing the trials and triumphs that had led her here. Anaya seamlessly wove her articulation through stories of her upbringing, the sacrifices of her parents, and the environmental stewardship inherent to her culture. As she spoke, she noticed nods of recognition, glimmers of understanding in the faces before her. The vulnerability she had once feared transformed into a bridge. Her heritage resonated with shared experiences, silencing the specter of inadequacy that had haunted her for so long. The presentation flowed effortlessly, the minutes morphing into a dialogue that lived beyond her fears. Her audience leaned into her words, drawn by the authenticity she had once doubted in herself. Questions emerged, sparking a lively conversation post-presentation. From skeptics, she had gained advocates. She realized that her fears had not disabled her, but had refined her message, gave depth to her insights. As applause erupted, Anaya stepped down from the stage, her heart soaring within her chest. It was not merely the applause she cherished, but the exchange that unfolded after. People sought her out, eager to learn more, wanting to contribute to her initiatives. She felt the weight of her community's expectations shift from an anchor to a buoy, lifting her toward realization. Recognition blossomed in various forms. Local leaders expressed their desire to collaborate on environmental initiatives. It was not just a personal triumph. Anaya was reminded that her journey could reverberate through the very fabric of her community. With this affirmation of her capabilities, she felt a pride emerge that was rooted deeply in her identity. No longer tethered by the question of whether she belonged, Anaya stood solidly in her convictions. She had proven not just to others, but most importantly to herself, that she was capable of charting a course forward, a course she had once feared to tread. In the weeks that followed, Anaya dedicated herself to building the workshops she envisioned. Each session became a platform for sharing not just knowledge, but the richness of diverse stories within her community. They became spaces of healing and empowerment, rallying individuals around common aspirations. Anaya had transformed her struggles into strategies and her doubts into determination. She emerged not just as a student, but as a leader, a young woman who could navigate the complexities of both academic and communal life, proving that heritage was not a burden, but a banner of hope. As she looked back on her journey, a profound realization washed over her. She had cultivated a resilient self, establishing a foothold in her future intertwined with those she aimed to uplift. She recognized that her purpose beamed brightly, a beacon of authenticity, illuminating the path ahead. Anaya had conquered not merely a presentation or an opportunity. She had conquered her fears, transformed her identity, and continuously proved that an unwavering belief in oneself could indeed shape destinies. Now, as she stood at the threshold of her next endeavors, she was charged with the knowledge that growth could flourish from the ashes of uncertainty. You need to subscribe now to continue following Anaya's inspiring journey and not miss out on the next exclusive stories of transformation. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and show your support for powerful narratives that awaken potential and reflect true resilience. Comment below with your reactions, thoughts, or theories about Anaya's transformative journey and the lessons she learned along the way. Don't wait even one more second to share this empowering video with at least 5 friends who need to witness this conclusion. Because every story of personal overcoming deserves an audience.